Hi everyone, I'm James Martin, and you're listening to What's Left.
When I said, hey, hey, what's wrong with you? I wanna turn you round upside down just to see you smile. You don't gotta be there or to be more.
And again, another welcome wherever you're listening to. Big shout out to our listeners in the UK, the US, Canada, New Zealand, and a special shout out to our listeners in Gibraltar who've been in touch with us just a few hours ago to say how much they enjoy the show. We enjoy having you with us. I'm going to bring on my hosts, Renee Barnett. Hi, Renee.
Hi, everyone. Hi, James.
And Sean Halsall.
Hi, everyone. And hi, James. Good to see you.
Hey.
It's good to see you. Now, I've got to start the show with some news. But whilst it might be sad for some people, it's certainly exciting for others. I just want to say from the outset that being involved in What's Left and being involved in various other shows and whatever else is a genuine and a real privilege. And What's Left is giving me, and I think some others, a voice in what feels often like a very voiceless world for those who share a very similar political and social outlook. And I think this being our 10th show, you've seen from the breadth of our guests just how widespread our views are, if not sometimes controversial. They're always born from a perspective of there's more that unifies us than divides us. So it is with some deep regret, everyone, that I have to announce that I'm going to be stepping down as a host. I will be back for guest spots and all of the rest of it. However, reasons that I'm sure you can all get in touch if you want to really know, but reasons that would potentially draw me into a bit of a conflict of interest have meant that unfortunately it's the show that I can no longer host, but I'm sure my former now co-hosts will have me back to drone on as I usually do, and all of this. However, remember, if you're in a workplace or you're doing a show like this or whatever it is, your first job is to find your successor. And so it's without further ado that I'd like to introduce a familiar face to What's Left, actually, and that is Mr. George White. Hi, George. How's it going?
Hi, everyone. Hiya, James.
Hey.
Thanks for bringing me on.
Welcome.
Now, some might accuse us of being nepotistic. Well, you come on as a guest and then you end up the host. So at this rate, we're going to have another 9 hosts. But
you didn't explain that it was an audition when he was on before.
I didn't want to show those pictures. Anyway, why we even asked him to do that? So yeah, sorry about the whole tutu wearing stuff, George. That was just for me.
Already forgotten.
Yeah, totally. Totally. But yes, so, and the other thing I've got to say is, as much as I was wanting to do a full show with everyone, it is unfortunate that I'm going to have to say goodbye so very early in the show. And that's due to a medical reason, nothing more. So anyway, I just want to say it's been an absolute privilege, just for everyone, really. I want to say a big thank you. And you're with a safe pair of hands, not in a safe pair of hands, with Renee, Sean, and George. So my love to everyone. Keep going, keep fighting, keep up the good fight.
Thank you, James.
Cheers, James.
Wow. Okay. Somebody start talking quick before I get queried.
Yeah, I think it would be remiss of us not to pay homage to the good work Jay's done in bringing this together and
Oh my God.
bringing people like myself and you together, Renee, and obviously George. And yeah, it's on to bigger and better things, hopefully, for Jay, and he won't be a stranger to us.
Well, he's an amazing person, as you both know, and he will be sorely missed on our show, unless and until we can drag him back on as a guest to talk about relevant things that are going on in the world.
Absolutely.
Well, George, how do you feel? We threw you into the fray after one audition that you had no idea you were doing.
Yeah, eager to get involved and hopefully can find my groove.
I'm sure you will. It'll become easy work for you soon. But I guess before we came on the air, I was talking. We were just chatting amongst ourselves about different things that are really going on right now, and I was just noticing the latest news on the Hollywood writers and actors strikes. It looks like after I think about 100 days or something, or since May anyway, the negotiations did resume, and the studios have now come out with a counteroffer, which is being considered and also further negotiated. But I think what they're doing a little bit of a different tact, whereas they were publicizing every single issue that they were arguing every day and where that issue stood. And they've decided that they're just going to go behind closed doors, duke it out, and not make any announcement until there's really some news. They think that's going to be the best way to speed it along. And so we wish them well. We're just talking about the great disparity between what the studios make and what writers and actors are paid. Not everybody makes $20 million a film. Most people are, get paid by the day. And
yeah,
it's
really interesting that you talk about that, Renee, because I think that is echoed in almost every industry. There are people at the top of the chain making absolute fortunes. I think the only reason we know about this is because their names pop up at the end credits of films, these sort of executive producers. Well, I was reading an article the other day about Lindsay Doherty, I think it is, from the Teamsters, and the work they did, promising that the writers that none of their members would be crossing picket lines. And obviously Hollywood relies on drivers and people working in that sort of sector more so than people would often imagine. And I think that sort of solidarity across sectors is always good to see, and especially from sort of young woman in the trade union movement leading that fight and pushing on it. It's very, very positive to see, because obviously the trade union movement's at least seen as being dominated by older white men, and they're leading, where it's fantastic to see young women coming through and really fighting back. I think the quote she'd said was, "We are the hammer to their pencils," which I thought was a really good sort of quote.
That is good.
I noticed that I think it was Warner Brothers had put a thing out saying they were quite happy about the strike. It had saved them $100 million in wages. Well, failure to mention any of the probably 100 million in wages, probably several billion in lost profits from the films that aren't getting made and the programs that are getting made.
It's a really interesting, yeah.
And in the in television, everybody's going to be watching reruns all year, and people are not going to be happy about that. So that's going to be drops in viewership and probably advertising dollars.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're just being smart, Alex. I was going to say something else about it. I was reading last night that they're doing stuff like, I guess they were picketing NBC Universal, and oh my God, forgive me, I can't remember the young woman's name that was in the Disney film, and they made such a big deal about it because she wasn't white. And but she was at the head of the picket line and everything. And I guess they were particularly mad at her, but they went out and they had their gardeners strip all the trees where the picketers were walking and standing, so that they had to be out in the super hot sun. It was really hot, here in Los Angeles, where they were, trying to do their picketing. And they just put all kinds of barriers in their ways and decided to do these huge moving and building projects to block them from being able to kind of get to the studios and stuff. But I thought, that's just so tacky and unbecoming. It's like, I wonder if people really realize that. And if that does get to the public, I don't think the public's going to be too happy with those kind of companies for treating workers that way. It's
really interesting you made that point, George, because that's the exact same argument. I was on strike myself when I worked on the buses back in 2017, and that's the same exact argument they go to us. We're saving this amount in wages, and you sit back and think, well, why have a company if you're saving money there? Why employ bus drivers if it's saving you money? It's clearly just to try and demoralize people on the picket lines and stand up for their rights.
Yeah,
it's absolutely.
We all know that employers are just in it for the for keeping you in work, aren't we? They don't really want to do it to make money, do they?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. We had Solemn Sheikh on a few weeks ago talking about AI, and that seems to be a massive part of this, and sort of protecting them jobs in the future with writers and actors, even with CGI and AI sort of stuff, and writing scripts.
Oh my gosh, yeah. As we were speaking earlier, they can hire you for one day as an actor, then they will own your image in perpetuity forever and ever, and then they can just create you again to put you in the background of some movie or in some other part of a movie. They can use your image in any way they want, as many times as they want, and manipulate it, and you got no right. So that's part of what the strike is about. Now, that's the most interesting part, really, to me. I mean, money's always an issue, of course, but that is really could have some far-reaching implications. It's like,
I don't know whether the same's happening over in the United States, but we've got an advert for I think it's an electricity company with Albert Einstein as this totally out of character for what Einstein was actually like, but they created this sort of cheesy character for Albert Einstein. Presumably his image, his estate is asked whether his image could be used, but it just opens the door to all sorts of things. Like, for example, things that you would never have willingly signed up to, things that are totally against your ideals or against your beliefs.
Having worked for many years in film and television, I keep going back to this certain term in every agreement, every release that we had people who were going to appear on camera sign. And there was one clause that said, that you release and acknowledge that, whatever production company has the right in perpetuity to use your image, likeness, audio of your voice, blah, blah, blah. And, back a few years ago, not even that many, you kind of knew and it says, in any media now existing or to be developed in the future. And of course, you're not thinking about, they're going to make me into a hologram or a robot or something, or an AI image. And so who knows how many releases there are where people have signed their rights away. Now, I'm wondering whether or not they might have a case to go back and, renegotiate that, or, if their image is used, if they have a right to a claim of some kind, because at the time that those agreements were signed, this didn't exist. And, how can you possibly imagine, what if they develop a way to, show your image and they have a camera or a device now that can show you nude, through your clothes. You certainly wouldn't want them using that image, so it's like, surely there's some legal action that's going to spring out of this, some new negotiating points. I would think there's got to be like a pinhole to get through.
Yeah, a couple of points there. I've been thinking while you've been talking that, yeah, I mean, Capital has done this forever. I mean, you see it with Mercedes using Che Guevara's image and stuff like that back in the day to advertise their cars, and it's trying to co-opt the image of someone who would never be into sort of flogging their image to sell crap to people. But it shows Capital just eats everything up. It'll eat, and to the point of where now it's not content with just selling shit. It is needing to sort of sell us to ourselves. Because there was talk of there could be potential to film yourself and put yourself into shows and stuff like that through AI and as a sort of gimmick. It's insane. And yeah, Capital will sort of co-opt. It doesn't care how. The thing is, we look at it as if it's a value system. It isn't. It's a means to amass massive amounts of wealth for a very small amount of people at the expense of the rest of us. And that's how it's going to react. And again, with the legal argument there, I mean, myself, I'm always more of a fan of what them writers are doing now, taking industrial action and direct action to hurt these companies where they're always going to have more money to fight this in court than the workers will.
Yeah.
What they can't do is beat solidarity. If we say as workers solids together, we can't be beaten. It's
yeah. I mean, it can be a much louder voice, and it can actually, cause work stoppage. So we do have a lot more power in numbers. Obviously, I know a lot of times, people want to take some sort of action, but they're afraid of repercussions, and they may be the sole support of their family and can't afford to lose their job. So collectively, that's the only way to do it. When it comes to going against these big giants, think about people like Jeff Bezos, and Amazon and stuff. And you know what? I was thinking the other day, I'll bet you Jeff Bezos is like thanking his lucky stars, sitting on a beach somewhere, sipping a cocktail, thanking his lucky stars right now for Elon Musk. Because Elon Musk is causing such, so much turmoil and chaos that nobody's been talking about Bezos in a long, long time. And he's probably thinking, I got a reprieve because, somebody's actually worse than me, at least in some ways. But I think about people like that. And I'm not just picking on him because there's a bunch of billionaires out there. He's just one of the biggest, but it's like, how do you really enjoy it when you know that there's some just starving children out there, or that people don't have a place to live? People are fleeing horrible circumstances. People are living in war. It's like, but yet I have to have, a 52-room home. Of course, I don't go in most of those rooms, but I don't get that mentality.
I think it's
There's
even more.
There's some interesting psychology going on there, because again, the motivator, when you get to such levels of wealth, the motivator can no longer be money, can it? There's some void that can never be filled within them people, isn't there?
Yeah.
There must
Yeah.
It's even more interesting. Right? You talk about these billionaires just doing their thing, and how can they ignore these people starving and homeless? It's even worse than that. It's the reason we have such poverty and destitution in the world is because of these people hoarding vast amounts of wealth. They are the direct cause. They're exploiting what no one becomes a billionaire because they're smart or hardworking. You become a billionaire by exploiting other workers. That's the only way you get there.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of Mary Trump's book. Donald Trump's niece wrote a book, a negative book about her uncle called Too Much Is Never Enough. It's just grab for the power, grab me. You're loyal to me, but yet I've got nothing to give back to you. Nothing.
There used to be some there used to be some give back, because I think the sort of prototype billionaires, your Rockefellers and whatnot, were sort of wanting to leave some kind of legacy behind, either the building that was named after them, the library projects that some of the
philanthropic
works, but also I think a lot of them sort of believed in an afterlife and wanted to buy their way into it, sort of thing, by leaving behind good works that sort of made up for all the what was on the other side of the scales, how they got their wealth in the first place. And that doesn't seem to be there anymore.
The ironic thing as well is, what do they think the logical conclusion to this is when they've hoarded that much wealth and none of the rest of us have got anything? What do they think happens at that point? Because the security guards who guard their wealth aren't going to be up for much protecting the Jeff Bezos' gold bullion or whatever. It's people. If you don't compromise with us, people will take what they need to live. That's the logical conclusion to this, but they don't seem to get that. It's interesting.
I don't think it's just the sort of the villagers coming with the pitchforks and the flaming torches, though. It's also going to ruin the model, isn't it? That the people who work for you need to have enough money to buy the stuff that you make.
Yeah, we spoke about that a few weeks ago when again Salim was on, where it's the inherent flaw in capitalism is eventually you're going to have workers thrown out because robots are doing all the work. Well, who's going to buy your shit when no one has any money? That's when it all falls to pieces.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it is a dilemma. I mean, you never want to be one to, stand in the way of progress. And I certainly don't want it to be like it was, when cell phones came out there. I'm not getting one of those things. It'll give me cancer or, whatever. The government will be listening to me. Not that they're not, but, now we all have them, is that the way it's going to be? I can see some, of course, there's been a lot of, semi-AI CGI, done in Hollywood now for a number of years, especially in, the big space movies and things like that, where, you can't really film on set. But been tinkering around with, what is it, Chat GPT, and, I thought, oh, this is great. This is fun. It's easier to research and blah, blah, blah. And then I wrote it wrote, according to my direction, maybe 50 different pieces, 50 different articles. And then I just lost complete interest in it. And I thought, no, I don't want this. And plus, it's not a very good writer. Or at least, I should have had it written. But I did have some fun with it because I did have it write a long poem in iambic pentameter. I said, write a poem in iambic pentameter about a woman who catches her husband cheating. She kills him and gets away with it. And I mean, it was like a good 12, 15 verses. And it sounded very Shakespearean. It was so funny. But, you know, of course, I was just playing. But I can see, like, it's a quick way sometimes to get sources on certain things. Like if you're looking for a fact and you need a bunch of sources to confirm it, things like that. I can see how that would be of assistance to a researcher or a writer.
I think as well.
When do you stop?
Yeah, the human condition has been passing down oral stories and unwritten stories about our experience, and are we going to hand that over to AI to sort of relay to the next generation the human experience? It is scary, and I think that is the scariest point of it. With film now absolutely has a valuable place in society. It's some of the greatest sort of things that most people will enjoy, films or books and stuff like that. Like, are we going to give that over to a non-human entity to sort of start telling our story for us? And where does that lead? Where does that lead to sort of our value system in society, and where we draw our morals and ethics and all that from? And I think people often don't give credit to film and books for shaping society how it is as much as they should. I mean, most of our ethics and values are based on one of three of the books written around 2000 or more years ago, which suddenly have played a massive part in how society's formed. Are we going to hand that over to ChatGPT next for the next round of civilization?
Well, it's also the sort of, well, two parts really. One, the way it works, it trolls what is already written, on, you know, what is already on the online catalog, and uses that as the source material. So as you will have more and more AI generated material to be the source material, it will become more and more derivative of what it's looking at. But it just seems
incestuous information.
but also it lends itself to this sort of censorious sort of filtering out all sorts of viewpoints, because if it's only the published material out there, it's already made itself through the censor to become published material. So it will only ever search that to find its sources.
That is one of the things that's already sort of at play, is you do have to watch it. There will be a slant, you know, to their articles. You know, you might just be looking for a straight report, but it's going to be slanted in some way or another. So you have to really be, you know, careful about that and keen about that.
Yeah, and again, the media's already slanted in both the US and the UK, which our media systems are slanted sort of center right to the extreme right in some cases. So that's the source material that's being churned out, and it's drawing from that and then compounding on that. We're going to see ourselves with more and more sort of right-wing hysteria. I mean, we see it in the UK at the moment with all the stuff around migrants and the sheltering on the Bibby Stockholm, this floating prison, for lack of a better word. And the stuff in the press is absolutely vile, and it's dehumanizing, and it's not healthy, and we shouldn't be allowing ourselves to be drawn into that, and certainly not allowing computers to generate more and more bile, which elicits reactions. Yeah.
It already, without the AI aspect, it already allows the narrative to go. What's already put out there already allows the narrative to go in a certain direction. Just what you were saying there, Sean, about the Bibby Stockholm. But so one of the Tory MPs, one of the Conservative MPs in the UK, who's actually the chair of the Conservative Party, some of the comments that he'd made about if migrants didn't like staying on the barge, they should F off back to France, and he said other vile comments as well. Things that would have, even say 10 years ago, I think would have been career ending for a politician. And he's also involved in a sort of, I suppose, to tenuously call it a news program, but he's involved in a news broadcast. And again, somebody who was on a news program would say that 10 years ago, I think it would be the end of their career in broadcasting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's strange how far the Conservative Party have sort of shifted since Brexit and since Nigel Farage allowed himself to pull that party over to the extreme right, and sort of it's ironic for a man who's never won an election. He's got a hell of a lot of influence over politics.
That is so weird. Yeah, of course, he and our former president were quite chummy. But yeah, here, and I can remember my grandma, when I was little, always complaining and saying, "Oh, I don't know how much longer this old world's gonna last," and stuff. And oh, grandma. And but honest to God, I have never seen in this country the divisiveness that we have. I mean, it's quite dangerous. People on the right are threatening to physically kill you just for being a Democrat or being a lefty. It's really insane. And I have a very close friend of mine, a lifelong friend, known her since I was a week old. She lives in Sarasota, Florida now, and she had some work done on her home. Her neighbor across the street just so happened to be a contractor. And she's probably only been there about a year or so since she moved there, so she didn't know him that well. Had him build this deck for her, and he told them when he was done, "That's the last work I'm going to be able to do for you." He said, "Because when the revolution comes, I'm going to have to shoot you because you're a Democrat."
And I think that stems from no one's really offering any real substantial answers to people. These political parties know then they haven't got the answers in the current framework. If we're going to keep on doing what we're doing with Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk's still around, you can't make substantial change that you need. So instead, they draw down on sort of this culture war sort of nonsense and division, the politics of division, because if you get everyone hating each other, that's easy. That's easy politics. You put them out, they're the enemy.
The scary part is that one side is armed to the teeth, not just with knives or guns, but assault weapons, weapons of war, pretty much weapons of mass destruction, because, you can kill a lot of people with an automatic weapon, as we've seen many, many times over in our schools, concerts, gatherings,
I would say, Renee, though, what are your politicians that you've elected doing about that? They're the people with the power to legislate against that.
Tell me about it. You tell me.
Not just the arms, but also the lies and the mistruths that can be peddled on the media broadcast. I mean, just calling back to the comments in the UK, which is coming out of GB News, which has been purposefully set up as the Fox News of Britain.
Yeah.
It's been deliberately, it's been recognised by the people who've stumped up the money to start it that Fox News in the US works, and we want a piece of that for the UK.
Yeah. The only thing that gets rid of any of those guys seems to be the sex scandals they all seem to get themselves involved in. I know GB News has just had theirs, and there was one at the BBC, and then.
But it's really interesting because the GB News one isn't getting any traction.
Really?
It's not the same as this. Apart from in sort of left wing echo chamber circles, I think part of that's no one really cares who Dan Wooten is. It's not like he's a big name.
Yeah.
Like people, and again, I think them sort of stories only come out if people are willing to do you in.
Yeah.
It's interesting what does come out and when.
What's crazy is that they can do anything. They can say any lie that they want to say and just really disrupt society. But if they have an affair, that's big news. It's like, why isn't the big news, which affects many more people than whatever Dan Wooten decides to do with whoever.
The frustrating thing is, Renee, that the big news should be this system we're all living in is killing millions of people on the planet a year. Not in our countries, not in the global north, but the global south, which is sort of propping up this farce. And we're expected to just keep watching, and every now and again we'll back a coup somewhere and business as usual after it, and just exploiting these countries for the resources. It's frustrating, but this sort of tinsel around the edges is what we're all being directed to watch and care about. It's frustrating.
Yeah, we've got lots of distractions, and I'm sure that's no accident. That is certainly the truth. Yeah, the whole situation in Africa, for me, is really complex and confusing, and all these different players involved. I mean, like, if you had a magic wand, either one of you, what do you think should be done there? I mean, should everybody pull out?
I think, to be honest, Renee, there's been enough white men making decisions about Africa for long enough. I think it's time to
offer some support when asked for, like if they need help, human aid or financial aid or food or something like that. We help in that way. But
I think it's wipe the debts immediately, wipe any sort of debts that we hold over them, and the UN hold over them, and what other organizations hold this debt.
Russia just did that, as a matter of fact.
Just wipe the debt and let people in those countries, if they want aid, ask for aid. We should absolutely supply that for all the damage that Europe and the US have done in those countries over the years. But people need to decide on their own destiny and future. It's not up to us. Like I said, there's been enough white Europeans deciding the destiny of Africans. I think it's time that Africans decide their own destiny.
Yeah.
Just with that, Sean, I think sort of possibly James could have offered some insight into this, but in the sort of former French colonial part of Africa, I think there's two franc zones, two currency zones that are backed through Paris and used to be pegged to the franc. They're now pegged to the euro. And by having their currencies controlled by a Western country, it leaves those countries as the proceeds from the things that they sell, the minerals that they exploit, all seem to siphon off out of the country and into the sort of parent currency that runs their grouping. I think unequal trade is one of the big things that happens on the African continent. It's sort of the literal colonialism of owning rights to a territory have sort of disappeared and been replaced by corporations owning the rights to exploit minerals and agriculture and various things.
Yeah, I mean, the British Empire with the sort of East India Company was the forerunner to using a corporation rather than direct rule, and it's again back to capitalism causing all our problems while the world burns.
Yeah, it's just I think the first hurdle in really changing that is to, as you say, change the conversation, change the impact of some of these trigger words. Trigger words here are socialism, Marxism, communism for sure, because people don't know what it really means. They think because someone is labeled communist, that means that that's a communist country, but I don't believe that there's any real communist country right now. And but if I were to say communist in just about any conversation, any room that I can think of, people would think, oh my God, what are you saying? You're so radical. And I have to admit, I would have thought that way myself, several years ago. But the more you're exposed to other people and other cultures, then you start realizing that you only think the way you think because that's what's been drilled into your head. That's how you've been programmed. Same thing with religion, which is another hot button with everybody. There's a big deal here now where, the right wing is trying to make this the laws based on Christianity here. And they, cite the founding fathers. This is a Judeo-Christian country, just like the founding fathers intended it to be. But they did not. They absolutely did not. They took specific care to not have it be religious, to make a sharp demarcation between church and state.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you agree, and this is only my own opinion before people pile on, but I think America's going through a bit of the United States of America is going through a bit of an identity crisis. It doesn't really know what it is, and it isn't one country. It's 50 different countries, really. It's every state has its own unique sort of ideas. I mean, you can go from, I think it's Minnesota, where there is still like a Labour Party and stuff, and it's sort of divorced from that Democrat Republican stuff, and it's still industrial, and Pennsylvania similar with that proud working class heritage. But then you go through Midwest and it's very different, and then the coastal sides where this idea of the metropolitan elite, which would probably be similar to London here, the sort of Midwest being the north of the country and the coastal sort of elite stuff being metropolitan elite being London, and you could probably it's you see where deindustrialization and leaving people behind politically just pushes people into reactionary politics.
Yeah.
I think some of it's been a very long time coming as well. If you look at for example McCarthyism, so pre-McCarthyism and post-McCarthyism. Before McCarthyism, there was a very strong tradition in the United States of labor activism, socialism, a left-wing current. And after McCarthyism, especially sort of going back to the movie stars and the writers, where there was a sort of uprooting of anybody who had those sorts of beliefs could no longer write or act in Hollywood.
Or even if someone just said they did.
Yeah.
If they were reported, and you could be reported by somebody that, had a grudge against you or something.
Yeah. Well, what's it of sort of Charlie Chaplin, where Charlie Chaplin didn't have the US citizenship, as big a movie star as founding one of the big four studios in Hollywood, and then on a trip out of the country, I think it was to an awards ceremony actually, and then having the right to come back to the US revoked. It's a real long time coming where it strips out that current where nobody can even. It's basically leads into sort of thought policing, doesn't it? You're not allowed to have a certain current of views in the United States, or it could be career ending.
Yeah, if you stop the conversation, if you stop that conversation happening as well, it's 1 or 2 generations before them conversations aren't happening around the dinner table or anywhere, because it's just not a topic for conversation, and suddenly it's only one side of the narrative's ever being told, and the other side of it, where, I mean, some great thinkers were hunted down by the McCarthy stuff. It's you completely silence that side of the argument, and that argument's not being had a generation or 2 later. It's worrying. It's scary.
Don't worry, we'll probably have that removed from our history books here too, just like we do Black history and Native American history and everything else. They're having them banned. And people and librarians are being arrested for having the material still in their libraries.
For one mediocre right-wing politician to decide what is and what isn't un-American, it's quite sinister, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep. Well, we don't want white kids to feel bad about slavery. You know what? I knew about slavery. I didn't feel bad about it personally. I didn't feel like I had done anything. I certainly felt bad for what people went through, and that, realizing it was wrong, and very, very happy that we don't do that anymore. We do enough other bad things, but certainly that's not one that is legal to do here anymore, to own other human beings. But we can't talk about that in school.
Except in the private prisons.
Yeah. And then, and certainly you can't talk about, if you happen to be a child who has same-sex parents, you can't even mention it. Cannot mention it. Or if you're gay, you can't mention it. It's like, oh my gosh. Why don't we just go back to 1950 and, erase all black people from television and all gay people from society in general? They were just invisible back then. I don't get why people want to take us so far backwards, but that's exactly, what we're seeing here. What's it like there? Is it?
Well, just to say though, I don't think it is entirely all doom and gloom. I think is it Ohio who've just had their
yes,
they had the referendum on changing the threshold of what a majority is, and they've absolutely chosen to reject that. But I think there's other things. I think quite a lot of the states are looking to enshrine women's reproductive rights into the state constitutions to make up for. You'll have to remind me what the Supreme Court judgment was.
The Dodd decision.
It was the on abortion. It was right. What was the famous Roe v. Wade? Yeah.
Oh, the first one. Yeah, Roe v. Wade. The overturning of Roe v. Wade. It's like, and someone, I think it was just yesterday on a newscast, someone mentioned the fact that, a lot of women alive today that are voters today have only had rights over their bodies their whole lives. They weren't even alive before Roe because it was about 50 years old. So they didn't even know anything else. And it's like when you had your rights all your life and they start taking things away, that's even somehow worse than, like, oh yeah, I remember when it was that way. Now it's that way again. I think this, younger generation, the Gen Xers and Gen Zers, I think they're going to make a big enough fuss and take enough action. And, everyone's interested in it. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to have any more kids, but I care about all the other people that are. And also, it's not just pregnancy and abortion. It encompasses a lot. And it also makes your medical records available to your freaking local and state politicians and things like that. It's just awful. So
again, back to the identity stuff. I mean, America always touts itself as the land of the free.
Yes.
I mean, how many more freedoms need to be taken away? Legitimate freedoms, not just the right to make excessive amounts of money and throw them at a politician if you want, because that seems to be about the only thing left. But
No,
how many more
we still have our
freedoms?
guns. We still have our guns.
But it's just a shame you don't use them to get the right hands and fix a lot of the problems. But that's a joke, by the way. Before I get taken off everything,
We're
but
not.
it's the freedoms that you seem to cling on to are weird things. They're not really things that make you free. You haven't got the freedom to not be put in crippling debt if you get cancer or have a heart attack. You've not got the freedom to have, if you're a woman, to have rights over your own autonomy and body. It's strange. And I wonder if this sort of the legislative system rolling back your rights is sort of contributing to this crisis of identity.
And people don't even get it. They don't understand what they don't know or what they haven't known. I mean, I don't even know how many right now fundraisers I'm involved in for people who have cancer and other medical, dire medical issues and cannot afford the care. It's like, please, this is insane, people. Nobody should not receive medical care because they don't have enough money. It makes no sense whatsoever, and we can certainly take care of everybody. So
absolutely, and it's whether it's
for so long.
Absolutely, it's whether as a society you want to value money more than human life, and that's a decision we've all got to make, and make sure we hold politicians accountable. And yeah, it's back to us organising ourselves again as working class people, which is something we seem to have lost over the last 50, 60, 70 years of being smashed by Reagan and Thatcher and all the likes of them. But it seems like we're at a turning point where people are organising themselves in community groups or through trade unions and sort of grassroots stuff where we're rejecting mainstream politics and sort of finding the answers on our own.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're at a sort of precipice now where we're just going to start gathering steam and we will do what we need to do to look after ourselves. And if Jeff Bezos wants to fly to Mars, then let him.
But it's like, I know I've been ranting a lot today, and I'm sorry for that, but it's like you mentioned Reagan, right? We've got the right-wing people talking about people that don't have homes like they're horrible criminals. It's like the blight of the nation, and, you hear on all the little neighborhood apps and everything, people talking about them like they're less than human and things like that. And I think, oh my God, how many people are like one paycheck away, from being homeless themselves? And and most of those people are on the right. But what they do not understand and would not want to understand is that particularly here in California, our big homeless problem is directly related to Ronald Reagan when he was governor. And I think it was Proposition 13 or something that went into effect. And I mean, immediately there were tons of homeless people and mentally ill people. He closed the shelters and the mental hospitals, the mental health care. So I was working in downtown Los Angeles at the time. And I mean, it was sad, and it was also scary because I got chased by like a mentally ill person on 3 different occasions, when I would go out to lunch. And that was directly as a result of Ronald Reagan. And it's just built over all this time. It's just become completely untenable. But all they want to do is saying, what's Joe Biden doing about the homeless? Well, probably not enough. But, your side caused it in the first place. So let's all get together and see what we can do about it instead of just sitting around blaming people.
Again, the interesting thing, and this brings it back a little bit, how does Hollywood and TV portray homeless people? What is most people's experience of a homeless person? It's usually someone trying to rob you or mentally ill on the street or trying to get money for drugs and stuff. It's completely dehumanizes people how most people would interact with someone who's unfortunate enough to not not have the stability of a home or a support system around them, or be mentally ill and not be able to cope with running a home and stuff. And that sort of feeds into the problem. If that's your only experience, if you're living in Ohio somewhere, you've not been down Skid Row, you're not interacting with homeless people.
Yeah.
Your only experience is through media, then it makes it a lot easier to vote to take away those people's rights or to hurt those people and not give them access to medical.
Yeah, just because you're totally disconnected from them. But there was that one movie that came out. I've lost all concept of time since COVID. It's like I lost like 2 years or something. But it's a really recent movie, and I wish I could remember the name of it because it was very huge, got a lot of Academy Award nominations, and it was about people who were homeless and they were living in their cars and their caravans and, going from place to place around the country, and they'd meet up and, they might meet up again in the next camp. They might not, and that was the first time I've seen, in a dramatic film, certainly I've seen documentaries, but in a dramatic film, the subject being treated, really respectfully, looking, at people like people, and getting involved in their personal struggles, and how they got there and how easy it is to get there. And
that's one of the things you have to have, though. You have to have a scapegoat. There has to be others, don't there? There has to be, your problem is so much worse because there's these others who are trying to take it away from you, or they're using resources that would otherwise have been yours, or they're taking you for a ride. There has to be others, hasn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've run out of time, everyone.
We have. So what's left?
So what is left? I think from our talk tonight, we've learned organising and us sticking together and showing solidarity can't be beaten. That's the only way we've ever achieved things as a class is by standing together and taking care of each other. And to not dehumanize people, whether you're homeless, you're from the global south, these are people, real people with real lives and dreams and hopes like anyone else. And we absolutely must stand shoulder to shoulder. And if Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos want to go to Mars, then by all means, go ahead. We can get on fine just without you. So thank you, everyone, from me. I've been Sean Hulsell.
I'm Renee Barnett.
And I'm George White.
I am